Everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our FusionPro webinar. My name is Matt Roberts. I'm the VP of Marketing at MarcomCentral. I'm joined today by John Genovese, who's our FusionPro Sales Manager. This webinar today should be about 30 minutes. We are going to do some questions afterwards. So if you can see on the dashboard here, there are a questions section. So if you have any of those, please insert those in at any time, and then we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. So just if something comes up during the presentation, we'll look for it, and then at the end we'll make sure we get to it. And if there are any questions that you might think of afterwards, please just reach out to us, and we'll make sure to get those answered. Another reminder is that this will be recorded, and we'll send it out to all those who have registered today. So again, if there's any questions, or if you'd like the recording, those are going to be sent out and the questions will be answered to you. In the meantime, I'm going to pass over the rest of the presentation to John, and he's going to take it from here.
Well, thank you, Matt. Okay, so we'll jump right on in here. Bear with me one sec. There we go. All right. Okay, so today I'm going to take you through a few things here. There we go. We're going to go through our product suite real quick. Just spend a second or two on that because some of you probably have already seen that slide. But then we're going to jump into the FusionPro Expression product. And I'm going to show you a couple of different levels of the product. The desktop version, which is where we're going to spend most of our time reviewing the application, how things work. We'll talk a little bit about our production solutions, and then we'll give you a couple of examples of how you might use these production systems to create things like emails and websites with these expression on them. Okay, so at FusionPro we have a product of families, right? At the desktop level, we have the FusionPro Creator design tool. Now this is where you do page layout, right? If you have an expression type product, Expression creates these images, but you bring them in and put them on the page within FusionPro Creator. And then FusionPro Expression Creator is our desktop tool. Again, we're going to spend a lot of time in that. And then on the production side, we have for our high volume clients, we have the FusionPro Producer product and also the FusionPro Producer Expression add-on. So if you're doing high volume work that includes the expressions, you would need that add-on. And then at the server level, this is for folks that need document automation, or automated workflows, or any kind of automation, high volume use usually. We have our FusionPro VDP server, and then we also have the FusionPro Expression server. And I'll talk a little bit more about these in a second. Okay, so once again, we're going to take a look at the desktop application. We'll talk a little bit about the different modes that you can build these items in, different ways that you can use the templates. I'll show you how you work with FusionPro Creator. We'll also talk about using Expression with other variable data applications. And then, once again, we'll talk a little bit about these other areas. Okay, so with that, let's jump in to the application. Boy. Okay. So the very first thing we're going to do is take a look here. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So here we're looking at the expression application. Now I'm going to work down the right side and then we'll move off to the left side and kind of show you and talk a little bit about what's here. We'll start, of course, in the middle, which is where you're seeing a view of the expression. So in here, you're seeing three different elements, if you will. We have a background layer. we have the variable layer, and then we have the foreground layer. And you can see in this case that foreground layer is giving us depth. And you'll see that as a common theme throughout. We're going to take a look at that in a couple of different ways. The rectangular area here is the variable area, and these little bullets can be used to stretch this image. Bear with me, there it goes. Now, you can also add as many of those points as you need, because sometimes you need to be able to go around an object, let's say, or you want to follow a little different path. So you can come in and tell it to insert an additional point. And then you can tell it to insert more points. Okay, so there's an additional one. Bear with me here. There we go. Okay. So now we can put in, for example, a Y point. And now you can put as many of these in as you need to, wrap around or, conform this to whatever it is that you want to conform it to. So now I can pick up any one point and just drag it where I want it to go, and it will, take the form, right? Change it. Okay, now we are going to talk a little bit about how this is made in a little bit more depth here. So once again, we have the three elements. This particular mode is called image character. Now there's image character, masking test, fills and path, nodes, tiles, textures. I'm going to show you a couple of these. For right now, we're concentrating on image character. Now what image character means is that we have a handful of images and we associate them to the characters of the alphabet. So right here, if you're looking down this lower right-hand corner, you can see the A and then the B and so forth. Now, you can have several images, right? If you wanted it to make it look a little bit more realistic, you wouldn't put two E's that are exactly the same together. You'd have two of them there, with a little variation, right? So you can put as many images for each character as you want, and the system will simply randomly select those images. Okay, so this is called image character, which means that if you want to write in the sand, but you don't like this footprint look, but you do like this, because we sell a lot of these things on our websites, or you could make them up yourself. You can simply come up and replace the background image, put a different background image in, put a different foreground image in, and have a completely different looking graphic. Right? Very simple to do. So think again, once you're, if you're looking on our website at all the different variations that we have, if you've got something that catches your eye, the children's blocks, but you don't particularly care for the picture that's in the background, just remember that really what you're purchasing is the blocks, right? The image in the background could be anything. The settings over here are not quite as relevant as they will be in some of the other modes, but this is where you're putting in the different fonts that you might be using, spacing, and so forth. And I'll get more in depth in these as we get to the other areas. Okay, so that's the first mode that we're going to show. Now let's take a different look here. Bear with me. We'll show this one. Now this one's a little bit different. This one is using fill path. Now what fill path means is that we're going to look at the font and follow the path of the font. Now that's where these controls on the left-hand side come in pretty heavily. okay? Because if you were to change out the font to a script font, obviously this would look different. Now, along the same idea of the image characters, you still have little images, but these images are the little puffs, and you can't see them in the background here, but they're the little puffs that make up the cloud. Different sizes, different opacity and such, right? And they're randomly put on the path, which means that if I hit refresh, you're going to see a little bit of a different look. Not drastically different, but again, because it's randomizing. And then you have other controls that allow you to follow the path strict. So if we do that, or follow the path loosely, which is how it was set before. And then you can also set up some other parameters, such as thresholds and spread and scale and so forth. Okay. Now over on the left side, now we're getting into the sizes that we're going to allow for these images. Okay, so here we're saying minimum of 10 pixels, up to 1,000 pixels. Any rotations that we're allowing from and to. This is, the width of the font versus the height. And then any spacing. Tracking, right? And line spacing, leading. The next control allows you to determine if you're going to use a break or not. So for example, this one is no line break. So if I change this down here to Kristen Jones and hit refresh, you'll see you don't get a line break. Then if I were to go back and change it to automatic line break, it has, the ability to do that on its own. But let's say that the name was K Jones. On automatic, that's not breaking. And I may want it to break. I may want that to be on two different lines, right? So here, in this control, I can tell it that we're going to use a pound sign as the break. So when you're feeding the names here, if I feed in K pound Jones, then it puts it on two lines. So once again, you get a lot of control over how this thing is going to look. In addition, you can also set it for the DPI output. Now, obviously, if you're going to print, you're going to use something different here, right? You're going to use a higher DPI. If you have email or web, you might use 72 DPIs. I have this one set. Once again, in this particular example, we have the foreground image and the background image. Let's go ahead and just put this back. Okay, so that's our background, the one that's turned off. The foreground is simply giving depth so that the tree looks like it's in front of the image. And then, of course, we have the variable image. Okay, hopefully this is making sense how this all works. Okay, there's one more type that we'll take a look at. These are the most common usage, okay? Fill path, image character. Another pretty common one is the masking. So we'll take a look at an example of the masking example here. So anybody that's ever been to Chicago might recognize this next one. There it is. So that's the bean in Chicago. And you can see here that this one has a number of the points, right? Using the points to bend around the bean, make it look more natural. This one is, once again, using the masking. It does not have a foreground image. You know, really in this particular case, it doesn't need one. It does have the background. This one is using the font. So if we change the font, you get a different look, which means that it's also using all the other controls up here. On the lower right side, you can control the mask. So you can tell it that it has shadow. We'll refresh that. This one's a rather high-res image, and because it is masking, we all know that in processing, it takes a little bit more power to generate these images. But again, you can use these different settings to control the look. Then once you have the look that you like, then you can take the next step. Okay, now, the next step would very typically be using this image in FusionPro Creator. When you buy the FusionPro, or when you sign up for a subscription, I should say, you get the FusionPro VDP Creator and the FusionPro Expression product at the same time. Okay, so by far the most common use is for people that use Creator. And I'm not going to show you the details of FusionPro Creator. We'll be doing weekly, or not weekly, but certainly monthly webinars just on that topic. In the future, we're going to have monthly webinars that will be solution specific, and then we'll also do our typical FusionPro webinar. But here I have a document that's set up. If anybody that's ever seen a demonstration has seen this document, and I'm an older guy, so I don't do change real well. I've been using this for like 10 years. Alrighty. Just bear with me as my screen comes back. Okay, so this is FusionPro Creator. I would imagine many of you use it or have at least seen it. And we have variable areas. This particular document has a lot set up in it to show some of the different features that you may not see every day. So for example, you know, the drop shadow behind the variable, or the stroke around the variable. You know, if we go to a different one, you'll see. It's pulling in different pictures. That's pretty common. Embossing is a relatively new feature. On the back of this document is where I'm pulling in this picture, the expression image. Okay, so I have a couple of rules, but before I write a rule, the first thing I need to do is tell FusionPro Creator that this exists. And the way I do that is I say add an expression image, I give it a name, and I point to its location. Okay, now I have 3 of those in here. The sand one, which I've given a name called beach image, the France one, and the Vegas one. Okay, so simply telling FusionPro about these things. Then I create a rule. It's a new rule. It's a graphic-based rule. It's the personalized image rule. I say next. And then here it says choose the resource. I just created 3 of them, right? So I'm going to pick one. We'll say beach. Then it says select the content for the first text box. This is for the variable layer, right? Now this is a first name kind of thing that we're using here. And that's really all we want in this. And we would say, okay. And then there's another rule in this particular document that changes between the three of these expressions, right? So that rule is called the destination rule. Oh, yes. Okay. So here we are saying if the text value of the destination field, which is one of the fields in the database, right? The destination field right here, is Vegas, then return the Vegas picture rule, which is the rule that calls that FusionPro expression. If the text value of the destination is France, then use the France picture rule. Otherwise, use the beach picture rule, okay, which are the three different rules for the three different images. So now you can see here, this is calling in Cancun. I might also point out a new feature here. The color of that word is being used or based on a data in the database. So the value's right there under color. When I do the next one, this now says Vegas. So it's using the Vegas picture, or the picture I've designated to be Vegas. And then Miami is a beach town. So it's not Vegas, it's not France. And we use beach, right? That's what the rule said to do. So that's how you would use FusionPro expression in the FusionPro creator world. When you do the composition here, it will automatically generate the image for each record. Now, what's nice about this system is that it recognizes when it's a repeat name. So if we have multiple Rosses, or more likely multiple Johns, Joes, that kind of common names, then it's not going to recreate that image every single time. It'll simply reuse, right? Now, if you use first and last, then it's more likely to have to recreate a lot of them, which is fine too. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do if you have some other system, or you have a very low end need for email or a website. Okay? And the way we do that is back in the application here, we start on the lower left, this thing called Producer. And when we start Producer, we're able to give this UI a database that has the names in it that we want to create. Then we're able to also tell it what DPI we want to use. Again, if we're doing something low res, you might set that to 72 for screen, for example, if you're going to send these images out in an email. If you're going to use them for print, obviously you would want to set it to a much higher value. And then last, we simply tell it where to put the images. Now, we can break that up if you're doing a lot. You can say 1,000 per directory if you have some kind of a need to change that up, right? How do we handle existing names here? I'm going to do a skip the image, right? There'll only be one John in there, for example. You can set the color space. And then you would create this as a job, and the system would take off and start creating those names in the subdirectory. Then with that, you can bring them into whichever tool you're using, or into, as I said, an email or into a website. Okay, so that's kind of a common use. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is the production systems. And FusionPro Producer, as I mentioned before, is an add-on to FusionPro Creator. So if you're here and you select this checkbox, that's telling this to do the composition at a server that's made for higher volumes. Okay, it can compose 3 jobs at a time. There's great workflow and so forth, right? So, just a higher end type solution for heavier volume. So that's how you would use the expression add-on. Same thing, you click this box, this document would go to FusionPro Producer, and every time it needed to create an image, it would do that at a server level, which is a lot faster than at the desktop level. Last but not least is when you have a heavier volume. You're going to be sending out a mailing list to 300,000 people. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of redundancy in that, but you don't want to pre-create these images. You simply want to create them on the fly. Okay, now I have a little example of that set up in 2 different ways. First off, I have an email. I'm showing you this in the browser, but this would be an email. And what happens is when the person opens the email, there's something embedded in the HTML of the email that calls the server to produce this image. So the image is produced on the fly. Okay, like right now. The next person opens it, or if 5 people open it, different people, then it's creating these images on the fly. It's very, very fast. And of course, you're building this image to be a little bit lower res too, right? 72 dpi versus some printing resolution. Now, this particular email has a call to action in it that says, click here to register for the training session. So we built a landing page that looks very much like the email. It has the same expression on it, but it has the area in here now for signing up. This example is, like for a bank, for example, that you're a new user, right? You're going to get an email, invite you to do some training for the session, the online system, for example. Okay. That is FusionPro expression in its various forms. Let's go ahead and see. Okay, I see a question about the image in a circle. I can't remember what version. This has been a few versions ago that this was put into FusionPro Creator. I'm sure it's in version 10. It might have been in version 9. I can't remember. Certainly in version 11. And it's right here. You're going to click on the shape. And then over here, I'm setting how much feathering. All right, so that's why it's kind of got the feathered look right here. But if I click that, it'll change back to a square shape. Like so. Also, in this version 11, they also put in a clip shape. So you could change this to an odd shape by selecting this button next. Okay. Okay. Matt, are there any other questions that you see?
Hi, John. No, I don't see any other questions. But if there are any that come in, just feel free again to reach out. We're going to be sending out this recording to all those who registered, so that'll be a great way for you to contact us back. But in the meantime, John, thank you for that presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
All right, yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good day.
Oh, hold on. There looks like one question just came in.
Yep, one did.
Can I put my own picture in it? Yes, that was over here. Let's go back here. at this point, this is the background image, okay? And you change that by clicking on, the folder here, and by simply designating a new picture. So whatever picture you put there would be the background image. Your picture may or may not need the foreground image. All right, that was that one. So you can put this on any images that you want. You can also create your own variable image if I didn't make that clear. You could create your own little puffs, or I use the one where you could create cheerleaders, for example, and have an overhead of the football stadium and spell out a student's name in the stadium. But then you could also use that very same character set if you took an overhead of the basketball court. You could spell out the child's name or the student's name in the ball court.
All right, awesome.
Are the features? Yeah, it's asking, are the features specific to version 11? They are not. And can you designate PMS and CMYK values? We are doing an image. These are all images. So it's whatever you're feeding it is the answer to that. Certainly in FusionPro Creator, if you're putting a background or something, yes, you can do PMS, CMYK, and so forth. Okay, Matt, there you go.
Perfect. No, thank you. And again, if any other questions come in, we'll reach out to those who asked. But thank you again, everyone, for joining, and this will conclude today's FusionPro webinar.
Take care.